Drau Blood by E.S. Stevens. Narrated by E.S. Stevens. Music by Aaron Kenny. Foley sounds from Freescape. Prologue. Selwyn pulled down his scarf and squinted into the rising mist. The air was chill, unfamiliar, and clean. He raked a hand through his ash-grey hair, tucking a loose strand behind an elongated ear. "I do not like this, Dendrian," he muttered. "This mist moves all wrong. It all but blinds the senses." With barely a whisper, a second Drau emerged from the mist behind him, his head and scarf pulled back in a similar fashion to reveal dark skin and a stream of dead straight white hair. "Peace, Selwyn. The caravan will arrive soon enough, and our contract fulfilled. We need only the patience to see it through." Dendrian's eyes glinted with a ruby sheen as he placed a hand on Selwyn's shoulder, whispering, "Relax, old friend. You'll be back in my sister's arms soon enough." "If that is so, then why task all 5 of your chosen to perform a day's wet work?" Selwyn twitched at the muffled sound of a snapping twig. Looking back, a third lithe silhouette stalked through the gloom before disappearing again. "Or is this just another opportunity for you to show off to the young assassin?" Dendrian's lips curled at the corners. "Well, Cerberus has to learn sometime. Better he cock up a caravan grab than something more important." 10 feet away, a pair of blood-red eyes moved forwards, now soundlessly. There was a slight limp to the younger Drau's gait. "You train him too hard, Dendrian. Your son is barely 150. Is it really necessary to make him suffer the same way we did? Times change." Selwyn hissed under his breath. Dendrian frowned. "You may be my first, Selwyn, but don't presume to school me on the subject of children. He will need to perfect all these skills if he is to someday take my mantle, when the time comes, of course." "Ever the fatalist," Selwyn gave a smile. "You are, of course, right, Master." He crossed his arms across his chest and bowed slightly before stiffening as Dendrian raised a finger. "They're here," Dendrian muttered, peering through the mist. "Time for our work to begin." Selwyn nodded, and as one, both Drau parted, melting into the banks of tall grass and tree growth. The caravan's wake was heralded by a storm of hooves pounding soft earth and the trundle of wheels. A faded sigil on the leading wagon had been poorly sanded off, yet still bore the marks of a pair of crossed steps, one rendered in ivory, now scrubbed to a pale echo of its former lustre. The livery of the house guard surrounding it was claret red. Rudimentary efforts had been made to disguise it beneath heavy cloaks of black wool, but the plate and mail would not obscure so easily. Selwyn took a brief head count as they pulled to a slow, a single wagon, covered, and so far as could be seen, unarmoured. 4 houseguard from House Dhal-Marrah by the colouring. An odd twist of fate, yet it would not be unusual for a lesser house to adopt the livery of a parent family, or indeed for a rival to use the guise of his enemy to escape suspicion. He had done similar himself a handful of times. A further 2 well-dressed individuals headed the group. One male and the other female, dressed in no particular house colour, but richly adorned. Selwyn imagined the necklace of the lady must have cost in excess of 300 denarii, given the size of the bloodstone. A princely piece, indeed. The male, on the other hand, exuded grace and standing, with poise more than physical baubles. Selwyn had been privileged to visit the royal court more than once to know that the posturing of noble blood ran through that one's veins. So 7, or possibly 10 to push, not an unreasonable number, yet given the cargo's anticipated value, fewer than he had expected. There should be more than this, Selwyn whispered, crawling through the undergrowth toward Dendrian. It is not like the Cerberex to take such a weak force, even if they are looking to avoid attention. Dendrian inclined his head towards Selwyn's. Now who's the pessimist? He glanced over his shoulder, and then left into the tree line before nodding. Sisendra is in position, and should anything go sour, well, he gestured behind him. There are reinforcements if needed. He checked the miniature bow held beneath his left arm brace and unsheathed his rapier. If we allow this casual thievery to go unchecked, it could destabilize the fragile alliances we fought to make. Better to bring about an end to this now while it's still young and make an example. The Cerberex won't tolerate failure in their ranks. They'd sooner declare these fools to be nothing but impostors, but it will have the right effect all the same. Dendrian shifted his weight fractionally in preparation. Be careful, Selwyn smiled. None of us are as young as we were back then. Dendrian snorted. Speak for yourself. Are you growing old on me, Selwyn? He leaned forwards. You're forgetting the first rule, he smirked. Assassins don't play fair. With that, he sprang towards the caravan, keeping as low as he could. Barely a sound to mark his passing. It was the horses who felt the assassin's approach first, their nostrils flaring as they paced the ground at the sense of oncoming danger. Herd instinct took hold, but it was too late that their riders heeded their warning. Dendrian bolted atop the first charger, severing the jugulars of 2 houseguard before they were so much as aware of the blade at their throats. Jewels of crimson ran along rapier's edge, dispersing to the ground with a flick. A hailstorm of black and silver-fletched bolts soared past, placing a third out of action, and maiming one of the wagon's horses as it pulled atop the other. Dendrian! A female voice called out from somewhere ahead. The wagon! Dendrian looked up just in time to see Selwyn leap across the body of a fallen horse and send a dagger spinning into the torso of an emerging houseguard from within the wagon's interior. The dagger held true, but despite the force of the throw, scored little purchase against the armour. Selwyn bent back as his opponent returned the favour with a backhand swing of a barbed sword. Dendrian locked a bolt into his crossbow and fired, watching it sink pleasingly up to the fletching. The houseguard sank to one knee in surprise, giving Selwyn the only opportunity he needed to knife the fool from ear to ear and kick him back into the dirt. He had no time to mutter thanks, as 3 more had begun to appear from within. Selwyn shrugged a razor-edged, curved sword from the scabbard on his back in preparation. Dendrian allowed himself a prideful nod. Selwyn was a masterful swordsman. He could take care of himself. Reaching into a pouch at his waist, he pulled out a black metallic orb and gave it a furious shake. From pinprick vents on its surface, a black smoke began to erupt, and the smell of phosphor permeated the iron tang of blood-filled air. Sprinting, he weaved his way towards the wagon. Moments later, a high-pitched scream brought him to a sudden halt. 100 feet away, Sisendra sank to her knees as the point of an elaborate blade sank into her side. The bejeweled female gave a sinister smile as she gave it a twist, extracting a further scream from her prey, and yanked the blade free in a welter of blood. Sisendra dropped her daggers and clasped a hand to her side as runnels of red escaped dripping from her hands. She looked over to Dendrian, her already alabaster skin appearing to turn whiter still. Dendrian hurled the smoking orb at the wagon before twisting under a falling blade, spinning in a bid to reach her. As he turned, a lithe form sped past him, its speed rendering it merely a smudge in the gradually receding mist. Cerberus interposed himself between Sisendra and her attacker. The lady stepped back in surprise, before inclining with an understated curtsy. She launched at him with a flurry of lightning-fast blows. Blades crossed, and Cerberus parried. Just. Behind him, Sisendra gasped, falling backwards as her eyes began to roll. "Cerberus!" Dendrian reached into his pocket and withdrew a crystalline vial of amber liquid that pulsed with a low glow. Flicking it towards the younger Drau, Cerberus twisted away from a slice meant to gut him and rolled, grabbing it in an instant before it hit the floor. From the other side of the battlefield, Selwyn's voice rose above the din. "We need to finish this! More are coming!" Selwyn called as he joined Dendrian from behind. Blood, not his own, was sprayed across one cheek, and several heavy scratches were sliced into the black leather of his armour. He pointed as more forms began to surge out of the mist. "Better to leave and live, friend. They knew we were coming. We are betrayed." Dendrian nodded at the wagon, now engulfed in thick, choking smoke. House Dhal-Marrah does not flee when the job is half done. Go, greet these new friends. I'll see to this. He pulled his scarf up over his nose and headed towards the wagon, his footfills filled with purpose. For a moment, time slowed as the smoke enveloped him, muffling the sounds of combat. The numb, cold, and reassuring scrape of a knife from his belt permeated the sudden calm. He spun the blade and wrenched the wagon's coverings. The air blasted before him. Pieces of the wagon hurtled across the battlefield, sending Dendrian flying backwards before landing heavily on his side. From the wreckage, seemingly unscathed, stepped a figure swathed in a cowl of crimson velvet that seemed almost monastic. No weapon rested at his hip or hand, no badge or staff denoted his loyalties, but his hand flickered with a pale green haze of tiny sparks. Without word or issue, the figure stepped measuredly towards him. Flexing, Dendrian pushed himself to his feet, only to wince at the familiar stab of pain from a cracked rib. "Warlock," he snarled, the word like a curse. "I should have known that this confounded mist was magically wrought." The figure's hood twitched with what may have been a laugh as he stepped ever closer. The air around him hazed in his wake as his fingers flexed, plucking the air like a stringed instrument. Arcane words hissed from within the hood, yet the heat of the curse barely caressed Dendrian's skin as he dropped to the ground. A blur of movement barreled into the warlock, bringing his aim off by a fraction. With a heavy gash that rendered the left side of his armour useless, Cerberus held out a hand. "Father?" Dendrian knocked the boy down to the floor with a hamstring kick as the flicker of witchfire seared the air where the boy's head had previously been. The pounding of feet and hooves signalled the arrival of a fresh column of houseguard. Dendrian looked between them. He could see no sign of Selwyn as he and Cerberus found themselves encircled. Unlike the others, this new arrival wore their house colours proudly, dispensing with any cloak for the preference of javelins. Teal-green hide that had been hammered with brass rivets adorned those Dendrian could see, and the badge of a coiled serpent around an unsheathed sword was engraved upon the right shoulder. "Stay close," Dendrian whispered to his son as the circle tightened. Cerberus did not respond, but Dendrian could feel the tautness as the boy prepared for the strike. He surveyed the sea-green hues and drew himself up. I am Lord of House Dhal-Marrah, under contract to return stolen property of the crown. We have no quarrel with the House of Triliri. Our contract extends only so far as the procurement of this caravan. Leave, and none of you need feel the kiss of my blades. Dendrian lowered his rapier slightly and waited. So this is what passes for the mighty House of Dhal-Marrah? A male voice, heavy with aristocratic resonance, floated through the air. Several teal-dressed bodies parted to allow a young Drau of noble bearing access. I must say, he continued, I was expecting something more. Dendrian lifted his rapier in salute. I don't believe I have had the honour. Then again, I have no need of sellswords. The noble smiled, pinkish eyes glinting as he gave an elaborate bow. My apologies. Where are my manners? Malinar, heir of House Triliri, or at least, he held out the bloodstone necklace. I am now. Dendrian gave a curt nod. So Lord Triliri sends his little boy, does he? He gave a laugh. He must really be terribly attached to you. The indulgent smile on Malinar's face dropped to a scowl. Your time wanes, Dhal-Marrah. Your family may be the power behind royal privilege, but times are changing, old man. The Cerberex have promised a considerable reward for you and your brat's head, and I fully intend to collect. The corner of Dendrian's mouth curled. Old man, is it? The Cerberex would do well to remember who brought the body of their lord home, rather than let him be feasted by crows. For such a seasoned warrior, you talk far too much. He eyed the ring of guard. You know, there is a saying we call the third rule. Malinar's eyes narrowed. Don't. Dendrian glanced around. Get. He looked back at Cerberus over his shoulder. The boy was grinning. Close. As the word left his lips, he pushed his fingers into his ears, watching as Cerberus immediately did the same. The others were less likely. A high-pitched whine pierced the silence. Malinar looked at the Triliri guard in confusion for a moment before the agony swept him and a number of others up like a ship at sea. Soon he was rolling on the ground, grabbing his head, while others began to bleed from their ears and noses, dropping their weapons as they sank to the dirt, screaming. A smell of ozone and a heavy popping sensation revealed a female Drau. She appeared within the confines of the ring to a reception of scraping steel. She held up a hand as those still standing reached for their weapons. I would not recommend it. Her skin was the colour of pyre smoke, and her hair hung in wisps of deep grey, the colour of a brewing storm. Dendrian smiled as she passed by, daring a brief kiss. Your timing is impeccable, darling. The lady nodded, the black lace of her robe giving the suggestion that she floated. Getting our son into more trouble, I see, Dendrian, she tutted quietly, under her breath as she worked her way around to Cerberus's side. At least you appear to have kept him in one piece, at least. Dendrian flashed her a full smile for a moment before the air fizzed with sudden static. Slowly, the circle of guards that still stood backed away as they looked up. Above, the sky had turned an unnatural purple, punctuated with sudden flashes of energy. A sound-breaking thunderclap sent all sprawling as a fork of eldritch lightning scorched the ground a mere hand's width from Dendrian, charring the earth black. With surprising strength, he turned and pushed Cerberus into the lady's arms. Dendrian stepped back, looking this way and that. Elriah, take Cerberus and go. Cerberus looked at his father as if stung. This is no place for an apprentice. Go. See that the others know we are betrayed, he shouted above the storm. From behind him, gentle footsteps stalked towards him. as a familiar figure in red stood poised, hand outstretched. Dendrian growled, "I know not what fiend you formed your pact with, traitor, but when Eroth devours your worthless soul, I hope for your sake it was worth it." Before the last few words had left his lips, Dendrian sprinted towards the warlock, flicking his blade out in a curve. He did not see Elria's eyes suddenly go wide as the warlock's hands moved with strange dexterity, weaving a baleful trail of reddish vapour. He did not hear her call as she wove the last elements of her teleportation magic, loosening her grip on Cerberus' shoulder. Cerberus seized the opportunity, his face a mixture of anger and betrayal. With the speed of youth, he sprinted towards the warlock while plucking 2 throwing knives from his belt. As he passed Dendrian, he narrowly missed his father's grasp. "Cerberus!" He ground to a stop at the paired voices of his mother and father, twisting on the spot. He brushed 2 fingers across the ground for balance as he turned to see their look of sudden panic. The air smelt of fire and brimstone, almost too hot to breathe. As time slowed to a crawl, his mother ducked to the dirt, his father still running towards him. Cerberus took a step to aid her, and then there was only pain. It was like nothing he had felt before. No poisoned blade or enchanted weapon compared. A burning, soul-scouring pain that pulled the life out of him. He felt the heavy weight of his own body strike the ground and tasted the iron grit of blooded dirt. Before the blackness pushed the edges of his vision, he saw his father blown off his feet, a mixtured look of surprise and agony wrought across his features. He looked at the scorch mark across his chest and slumped forwards. Then there was only darkness. Heavy hands dragged Cerberus' prone form through the slick grass as the rain lashed his face. He looked up, blinking, as the daylight stung his eyes and coughed wads of coagulated blood onto his chin. The hands let go, and he gasped in pain as his body hit the ground once more. Selwyn's face swam into view. Remnants of his armour still clung to him, and an angry red cut scored down one side of his face. "Eroth's fangs, he's alive," Cerberus heard Selwyn say as his vision blurred in and out. "Elriah, he's alive!" Hurried footsteps thundered towards the 2 of them. Elriah's hair swept on end as if she had stepped from the winds of a hurricane, her face coated with tears. "Help me get his armour off, Selwyn. I need to see what we're dealing with." Cerberus felt the buckles of his leather cuirass loosen, followed by hot pain and a stickiness as it was removed, and he was turned on his side. Cold fingers probed the fist-sized wound in his lower back, and he let out an involuntary scream before a numbing warmth swept over his body. For a moment his vision cleared, but the pain it cost him to breathe was almost more than he could bear. Slowly at first, the pain began to ebb, and the warmth grew till Elriah gave a sudden gasp, and the heat abruptly ended. "He's pact-marked," she panted, looking at Selwyn. "I've done what I can to ease the pain, but this is beyond my skill to heal." Cerberus rolled himself onto his back, groaning with immediate regret as the damp earth seeped into the wound. "Uncle?" Selwyn cradled him into a sitting position. Cerberus looked around. "Uncle," he winced. "Uncle, where is—" His voice drifted off as a fallen shape on charred earth struck him as sure as any knife. Tearing himself away, despite the pain and the protestations of those around him, he limped to the body laid out to the sky. "No," he whispered as he came close. "No." Dendrian's breaths came in ragged gasps that filled his mouth with blood that slipped from the corner of his lips. There had been intense pain, but he had lost all ability to vocalize it. Now there was simply a penetrating, bone-chilling cold and unimaginable weariness. He couldn't help but give a slight smile when he saw Cerberus's face suddenly come into view. Part of him had been sure the boy had died outright as the witch bolt hit. To see him still standing after such a blow, that was truly Dhal-Marrah. He reached up to his neckpiece and pulled at a silver inlaid brooch, tugging it loose with a jerk and pushing it into Cerberus's hand. The boy took it and looked him in the eye. No tears. "Swear it." The voice that came from his lips sounded haggard and strange. "Will you uphold the honour of this house?" Cerberus nodded. "Will you stand with your brothers and sisters against the darkness?" Again the boy nodded. Familiar footsteps came towards them. He looked at Cerberus, meeting the gaze. "I will," Cerberus whispered, pushing back a choke as he bowed his head. Elrya moved next to him and grabbed his right arm. Cerberus looked up at her, the sweat of exhaustion beading on her forehead as she spent the last dregs of magic she had. He gasped as a needle-like pain stabbed at him. When she removed her hand, a thin white subdermal scar, almost like the imprint of a tattoo, throbbed where her hand had been. It resembled the shape of the winged dragon and crossed knives of the Dhal-Marrah sigil. Dendrian forced a smile. "Welcome, assassin." He hacked a cough and shivered as the cold worked its way through his body. He gasped, grasped Cerberus's hand tightly. "A war is coming, my son. House Dhal-Marrah must answer. You must protect this family." He felt his breath tighten, unable to feel his hands as they slipped to the ground. The last thing Dendrian Dhal-Marrah saw before the embrace of death came was his son, his wife, and his friend. He could not have asked for more. Cerberus let a tear slip down his cheek as he watched the last dregs of life slip from his father's face. The sudden weight of his departure crushed him as surely as any mace. With trembling hands he pinned the badge to the cloth of his shirt and reached for his final throwing dagger. Closing his eyes, he ran his hand along the blade, letting the blood run between his fingers before dripping into the open wound across his father's chest. "I swear I will not let another Dhal-Marrah fall. I will avenge your passing." He gritted his teeth, squeezing his fist tightly. "I will be the last thing they see before their souls are sent to burn." Opening his eyes for a moment, Cerberus was certain that his hand was pulsing with a faint crimson glow. He blinked away the tears pricking his eyes, and when he looked again, there was nothing but blood.